Now taking the hobbits to Isengard!
Welcome to the Taking the Comments to Isengard. My name is Samuel, and of course, joining me is also Aaron. Aaron, why don't you go ahead and say hello?
Hey, everybody.
And today we are doing our second episode here on the podcast, and today we wanted to talk about honestly what makes Lord of the Rings probably super mainstream, which is what I say super mainstream, like, oh, everybody knows it. But I mean, like, mainstream enough that everybody can recognize it, which is the Peter Jackson original trilogy from the early 2000s. I mean, those movies really do make this whole series very, very palatable for most people. I mean, because I think before the movies came out, people saw the books, and the people that knew the references of Gandalf, knew the references of Sauron and stuff like that. If anybody said those words, automatically, oh, you're a nerd. But then once the movies came out, people were like, oh, this is actually really cool. But yeah, that's the topic that we're going to be talking about today. I mean, you're pretty well familiar with the movies, aren't you there, Aaron?
Yeah, I've seen them probably more times than I would like to admit.
Now, first question, and this is kind of an unofficial question: theatrical or extended?
Oh man, you know the answer to that one. Only the real. I'm gonna call some people out here, but only the real fans appreciate the extended versions. Yeah.
Yep. No, I 100% totally agree. And I just got my wife to watch the theatrical editions, and I'm like, yes, all right, babe. Now next time we're gonna be watching the extended, and she's just like, how long are those things? And I tell her how long, and she's like, dang it. But I'm just like, no, you don't understand. It's worth it, 100% worth it. But no, the extended editions are just so good. But we're going to be talking about those amazing pieces of art today. And we're just going to go ahead and jump straight into the first question, the first official question, of course. What are our favorite fight scenes from the Lord of the Rings trilogy by Peter Jackson? So, I mean, and it can be any of the fight scenes, not just battle scenes like, Pelennor Fields or Helm's Deep. We're talking about fights, anything. So, Aaron, why don't you go ahead and start us off? What are your favorite fight scenes from the Lord of the Rings trilogy?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of different reasons. I think that my favorite one has to be Helm's Deep, just because of how pivotal that battle was. And I mean, there's so many things going on with that scene. It's like, it's a nighttime battle. And I mean, there's that iconic scene where it's like the rain is like running down the side of the orc, and he's like snorting. And he's like, whoa, just a lot of adrenaline pumping through that scene. And then, yeah, you've got towards the very end, it's like, it's the dawn of the day, and Gandalf comes like sprinting down the hill with the relief army. There's just so much epicness going on with that one. So that's definitely my all-time favorite is Helm's Deep. I do have to say that I do really like Minas Tirith, just because of they filmed it a little bit differently. They focused on the sheer volume of people a little bit more. I mean, you've got Theoden's speech, gives me goosebumps every single time, especially when he's like, a sword day, a new day, and then he's like, on the horizon, and then he just like starts screaming. I got like goosebumps just talking about that. Yeah. I'm a weird dude. But so that like speech, and then you see the charge of like tens of thousands of troops. That I think with Minas Tirith, that part alone is like my favorite part of it. But I have to say my third is gonna be Battle for Isengard with the Ents. And the reason being is that I think that it was really pivotal that the trees stepped into battle, that they, essentially flooded Isengard, because Isengard was its own little factory mill for warriors. And so not only did they shut down the factory, they just flooded the whole thing and destroyed it. And then, so that's done. And then Saruman was basically toast after that too. So kind of neutralizing him, getting rid of that army, I feel like was a big part to winning the battle. So nothing theatrical that I thought was like super cool about it, but I just thought that from a pivotal standpoint, I always liked that battle.
I that's interesting that you bring up the Battle of the Ents, because I mean, like, I wasn't necessarily myself thinking about that, but I mean, it really was a fun addition, especially when you put it in contrast to what's going on at the Battle of Helm's Deep, because literally, they happen not exactly coincidingly, but I mean, like, they don't happen at the exact same time, but in the movie, according to Peter Jackson's understanding, like, he edits the shots back and forth in order to make it look like they're going on at the same time. But of course, he also has the Ents attack on Isengard happening during the day, when the Battle of Helm's Deep happens at night into the early morning. But I mean, I completely agree with you. It's actually a really fun thing to watch, especially when you see the Ents being able to just tree it up, you know, and they have like their way of taking out all of these orcs. And that's a fun pick. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and kind of this stems actually off of our last podcast a little bit. But the other reason I liked the Battle of Isengard with the Ents is because I don't know if I could say it's symbolic, but it's like you see this movement where other species are understanding the gravity of, like, that their world actually is in peril.
Right.
And I'm not going to go on the soapbox. If you want to listen to the soapbox about, blissful ignorance, listen to our last one. But the Ents were in the same boat. The Ents were like, this is our world. We don't really care. It's burning up behind us, but we're just going to keep on walking in the woods and doing our thing. Then they get pep talked. They decide to battle, and I think because of that battle neutralizing Isengard, that's a big tide, like turn the tide for the war. So
absolutely, 100%. I mean, because of the fact that like you called it, the little warrior factory, you know, Isengard was making all of these Uruk-hai in order to be able to go and battle the realms of men. Thankfully, I mean, the Ents went in there and they were able to undo all of that work that Saruman had put into making the Uruk-hai factories and breeding grounds, and so they really did help change the direction of the war. Of course, there was still a lot of fighting that needed to happen, but it went from hopeless to there is a glimmer of hope there. And I think Gandalf brings it up about Frodo's involvement with everything and taking the ring to Mordor in Return of the King as only a fool's hope, but you know how it is. But when it comes to my favorite scenes from my favorite fight scenes, from the Lord of the Rings trilogy by Peter Jackson, I would definitely put Helm's Deep and the Battle of Pelennor Fields definitely in there. I mean, like, those battles are just epic, and they're just incredible to see all of these people on set and just fighting each other. And of course, there was a lot of CGI involved, but at the same time, just the sheer numbers of the actual people. If you go in and watch the appendices of the movies and how they actually made them, like, they still needed hundreds of people on screen in order to be able to do a lot of these scenes. And then add in the tens of thousands of CGI characters on top of that. So it's so good. But I'm going to go with a little bit of a different choice here. Because, like, my favorite movie from Lord of the Rings is The Fellowship of the Ring. The first movie is actually my favorite, and it's really hard for me to say that because, I mean, obviously it's a continued story. I think each one is incredible, but the first one, and this is a little off topic from fight scenes, but just why I like it. It has the most color. So, like, I'm a huge sucker for color and different, like, artistry, different, like, visual media, like anything that has popping color and stuff like that. I will immediately give you props out of the gate for having good color. But which is also another reason why I like the Hobbit trilogy, even though, like, it's got its problems, I still like the color choices that they use. Anyway, But the Fellowship of the Ring also has this idea where it shows a journey. It shows the incredible character development of even Frodo in one movie. But then also at the end, even though it ends, with like saying there's still more work to be done, it still has a succinct ending where it feels like it's the end of the movie, and it was like, I feel good about this, while also saying adventure's still out there and there's still more to be explored. I don't like ends. I don't like endings, So Return of the King it's a phenomenal movie. It's fantastic, but it's not my favorite because it's the end, and I don't like it when a fantastic story ends. So yeah. So Fellowship of the Ring really did a fantastic job for doing that. But anyway, the battle of the Balrog and Gandalf is so good.
It's iconic.
Exactly, it's iconic, and oh my gosh, I mean, even though the Balrog is completely CGI, and Sir Ian McKellen is out there, in some sort of probably green screen land doing the whole thing. Oh, the amount of acting that he puts into it in order to just sell the scene for you, as well as the beautiful rendition of the Balrog. I mean, I can't imagine, even when I read the Balrog in the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, when I read the actual book, I imagined the Balrog the exact way that it was depicted in the movies, because I just can't think of a Balrog in a different way. The beautiful iteration of that character, the Balrog, and then also get Sir Ian McKellen's acting, selling that scene was just so amazing, showing the importance and direty of and how dire the situation was, even though it was just the only people that were really involved were just the Fellowship, the Balrog, and maybe a couple of orcs, but they had all run off at that point. The goblins had run off. It was just a few people that were really involved, but you could still feel the weight of the world on Gandalf's shoulders in that moment, because he knew that he had to protect the ring in order to be able to get that, and protect Frodo in order for Frodo to get the ring to Mordor. And it's so beautiful. Yeah, you go ahead.
I'm going to interject for just a second. So I just had this wild thought. You could almost say that Gandalf versus the Balrog is like essentially the quote Duel of Fates, but for Lord of the Rings.
Ooh, I think you could make that argument. I think you can definitely make that argument.
Because if Gandalf loses, the Balrog is either going to kill them all or like take them prisoner or something. That's like the pivot of the movie,
Mm-hmm.
Or if he, I don't know, or this could be another good podcast for another time. Like if he beats the Balrog, but it doesn't kill him, so he's still Gandalf the Grey, maybe he's not as powerful.
Yeah.
He can't help.
What would have happened with that? Now that's actually a really interesting thought.
Duel of the Fates, man, but for Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. I like it.
Now, you know what I want to see? Now I want to see a YouTube clip where someone takes the music from Duel of the Fates and then like puts it in for that fight. That would be absolutely epic.
Dude, we can make that happen. Oh, we gotta make that happen.
Special podcast episode.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. But yeah, no, that scene though in the movie, just it's so amazing, and then also it's incredible that it's so great that they even revisit it in order to kind of expound upon it in the beginning of the Two Towers. So it's just such an iconic scene. But then also, I will say another scene that I really, really, really enjoy is actually Sam going in and rescuing Frodo in the fortress on the Path of Cirathungul. When he just rushes in there and he's got two swords and he's going full on machete and he's just running in there cutting up orcs, dude. Like it's so amazing, but also like, and I think that this is just me personally. I'm a sucker for good stories, and even if they're super small, and intimate, as long as it's a very impactful and important thing that's happening, like I will definitely be sold on that being one of my favorite things. And why this is so amazing, it shows Sam's undying devotion to Frodo. Like, because we see it all throughout the trilogy, not only in the movie, but especially in the books. I mean, I think in the books they even dive into their relationship even more, but because you have a lot more time to deal with that. But in the movies, you see that Sam is devoted to his friend Frodo. You see Sam continuously over time and time again, just going back to want to be with his friend and save his friend. But then, dude, you go into seeing you just go and see how Sam just really will put his life on the line in order to go save Frodo. It's amazing, and I don't know. Just the whole thing too, the way that they set it up with how all the orcs are fighting against themselves too, in order to kind of lead into like that infighting, and then the fortress is all but abandoned except for a few orcs, and then Sam just goes in there and just wrecks. It's amazing.
And I didn't even really think about this, but we had talked about on the last podcast how, Sam like being the ultimate good guy and like his fighting for the cause.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's crazy to think about. Like he had, as far as I remember, he had the ring on when he was doing this. Like,
yep,
he was the ring bearer. He didn't have to go in to go rescue Frodo. He could have tried to just take it on himself and be like, all right, I'm going to try to go to the mountain. He could have kept the ring, but I think that's just that continuing that theme of, the purity and just the pure innocence and goodness of hobbits. Like Sam's like, I have the ring, but I know Frodo's there, and I'm going to try dying to go save him again and get him out of there. So
I'm going to save my friend. Sweet. Yeah, such a good scene, such a good fight scene there. But because I mean, it's such an intimate fight scene, and it really just continues to expound character. But with that being said, yeah, we should probably go on to our next question here. What made the action? We're actually gonna put these two questions together. All right, two and three here, because I want to make sure that we are speeding things along. What made the action great from the Peter Jackson trilogy? Because honestly, when you look at the Peter Jackson trilogy of the first Lord of the Rings, even now in 2021, we look back and movies are still being movie battle scenes specifically are still being weighed against the Battle of Pelennor Fields or especially Battle of Helm's Deep. I mean, I think that most people would have that in their top two, maybe even like generally the best battle scene in cinema is the Battle of Helm's Deep in Two Towers. So like, why do you think, like, what made the action in these movies so great? Why do you think that these battle scenes of Pelennor Fields and especially Helm's Deep are seen as the benchmark of battle scenes in cinema? Yeah,
so I'm gonna add. I don't know why I'm just getting all these Star Wars comparisons in here to fill this with. I'm gonna go on a brief story about Star Wars, and you'll see where I'm going with this. Okay. So this is a Lord of the Rings podcast, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this. But so for a couple of reasons, I really liked, even though there's hot topics about CGI and the scripting, I really liked the battle scenes from the prequels and the original trilogy a lot more than the battles in the recent trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the main reasons is the incorporation of music.
Yes.
And there was so many times I noticed with the new trilogy where the fight scenes had no music at all, and if they did, it was very minimal. But versus, like, if you look at the prequels, the original trilogy, or if we switch back over to Lord of the Rings, if you look at Lord of the Rings, every time there's a battle scene, it's like the meme of the dude on a beach with a piano on fire. Like the music, it just hits your soul, and the music slowly builds. So I'm a big fan of music with battle scenes. I think it emotionally invests you in it, and so that's number one. Number one is the music. Number two, they make it build so that Lord of the Rings specifically, they make the battles build so that it emotionally builds you up to what's happening. Number 3, I think just because of the overall development of the movie, each battle you understand the gravity of a win or a loss, or you understand, like if XYZ king is slayed, why this is really bad, or so I think that's really big. They help you understand the gravity of the battles.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we're just going to go slay each other and whoever wins wins. Okay, this list is going to number 4. I think that it's because I like the filming. So you had mentioned that they incorporated so many real people, and just to compare Lord of the Rings versus The Hobbit for a moment, one of the reasons why I really enjoy the battle scenes in Lord of the Rings compared to The Hobbit is because in the Lord of the Rings, they have so many real people.
Yes.
And I just think that really changes the physics. I'll call it the physics of and the flow of a fight. It just looks more real. It feels more real because it is real. And so you can change the camera views. You can zoom out. Sure. You can add in 30,000 CGI running with the 100 real people. But you still are relatively zoomed in on those real 100 people, So yeah, I'll say that those are the main 4. So I don't even remember what I just said, but it was the music, the emotional buildup, the gravity, and then I wouldn't say, I don't know if this is like a 5th or not, but the only other thing I would just say is how they capture the battle. So they had a good blend of like sword fighting, archery, and just of like contact itself. Like it's not like when people would fight, it's not like you'd see, well, maybe there was 1 or 2 heads cut off, but like it's not like they were super it's not like they were super graphic and overkill about it. Like it's not like you saw like guts spill out or something like that. But it was just enough of like, I don't know what the word for it. Gore is not the word I'm looking for, but it was just enough like, I don't know, you could say violence within the battle that it felt real.
Yeah.
So all of those things really get you invested, make it feel real. Like I said, the adrenaline, the gravity, and I think that a lot of movies will lack. They might have a couple of those elements, but rarely do they have all of those elements.
I would agree, and I want to jump in on that that a lot of the real actors point that you made, because let's be real here. The sheer amount of actors and extras that they had on these sets in order to be able to do these huge battle scenes, namely the Battle of Helm's Deep. Pelennor Fields had a lot of people too, but they were able to CG a lot of it because it was a flat it was a flat landscape that they were fighting on, so they were able to do a lot more convincing, like orc legions that were just CGI. But specifically in Helm's Deep, you had a very unique landscape, specifically also people up on the parapets of the castle, up on the wall. And so you needed to have a lot of real people on these sets. And oh my gosh, like they decked them out in armor. They went the extra mile. Everybody has a sword or a bow. Everybody is involved and a part of this scene. There's no skimping at all. They did not hold back on the quality and attention to detail that they had in these movies. And then you look at also, let's just go to practical effects in general, because the practical effects is really what sells these movies in a huge way. Like you also talk about the decapitations. I can think of 2 decapitations right off the top of my head. Number 1, Aragorn decapitates Lurtz at the end of the Battle of Amon Hen, at the Battle of the Fellowship of the Ring. So that's one. That was a practical effect. They didn't just go like, oh no, there goes, CGI head. Like, no, it was like they had to actually make something that would be able to go, top off the head.
Plop.
Like,
Yeah.
Plop, exactly.
Yeah.
And then second time, they had to do another practical effect. It just looks so funny and weird in Two Towers when the Uruk-hai cuts off the orc's head and then goes, "Meat's back on the menu, boys," you know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like all these practical effects really help sell the scenes. And I think one scene from the Two Towers, dare I say, that one scene from the Two Towers that didn't age as well as the rest of the movie, and so, dare I say, the movie did something not so fantastic, but I mean, it was just a product of the time, was the fight against the wargs, against the warg riders. So when the warg riders come in, the wargs that look like hyenas and stuff like that, like a cross between a wolf and a hyena, those things were they're pretty obviously CGI. They it's just a product of the time. CGI was still kind of newer at that time, at that point. I mean, there was amazing effects back then, but now, especially like when you look at the Hobbit movies too, the Hobbit movies over relied on CGI, but the wargs look beautiful though. And so going back to I digress, going back to that warg scene. The warg scene had so much CGI involved because the wargs needed to be there. And you can't obviously bring in a bunch of really cool moving animatronics. Like they would be super slow. They wouldn't move the right way. But then you stack that against the Battle of Helm's Deep. Just a couple of minutes, almost like an hour later, 45 minutes later, you got the Battle of Helm's Deep. And you can just tell just how real it all is. Even the giant explosion from the bombs that the Uruks put in the little culvert, and then the explosion of the wall, that was even a practical effect. That was a miniature that was blowing up. I mean, it just looks so good. And so
versus like a CGI explosion.
Exactly. I mean, it just like CGI is good. It's a tool, but so many movies today, they just overuse it. Whereas you can just it's almost like tangible, the realism of the first trilogy of battle scenes in Lord of the Rings. That the Lord of the Rings trilogy just has so many good practical effects. I think that's really what sets it apart as a benchmark. But also the music. I mean, Howard Shore did not need to go that hard, man. He went above and beyond. Like, especially the violins. Yeah. Like, I mean, I see so many memes now. It's like when you're an orc at the Battle of Minas Tirith, and then you hear a bunch of violins happen, go off, and it's just like, there's an orc going, oh, yeah, right, dude. Because the music is so good. Oh, it's so powerful. And you can feel the weight of the situation. I'm going to
interject for like just a second, but like, so talking about the music, something special that I think Lord of the Rings did with their battle scenes was that, so we talked about the violins, like how do I phrase this? It's like not every battle scene was super heavy music. So It's not like it's, like you get some movies where you get a battle scene and it's like the death metal turns on.
You're right.
But like, so if we'll take the Golden Child, we'll take Helm's Deep again. That initial battle charge is an insane rush, but yet what's in the background? That calm, like just that kind of calm, patriotic, violin playing in the background while there are like 30,000 people clashing with each other. And it just fits just right, so
yes. But then there's also moments where they use silence very well, or the lack of music. I shouldn't say silence, but the lack of music very well. The first like initial moment when all the Uruks are just like lined up, the 10,000 Uruks are just lined up right in front of the wall at Helm's Deep, and then there's all chanting. One guy accidentally lets loose an arrow and then just kills him, and then immediately all the just silence, and then all you hear is just rain. Dude, it's because immediately crap's about to go down because that silence is so heavy. It's so expertly woven together. And then also I mean, the music. Just to go before we go into our next question here, the moment in Return of the King when Faramir is charging back towards Osgiliath on horseback with all of his other knights, all of his other soldiers. They're going back, and then you just see all the orcs come out from the ruins, and they all just with their bow and arrows, and they all just aim up into the sky. What's going on in the background? What's this? Pippin. Pippin is singing that.
That scene,
that haunting, dude, and that is primo cinema, and because it's telling the story of how this callous father, Lord Denethor, is just an idiot, and he's fine with sending his son, his not favorite son, but one of his sons, just to go straight into the face of death and die, and then like all while that's happening, we have Pippin singing this just. It's an eerie song. It's meant to be a song, actually. When you look at the words, it's actually meant to be a song of like, almost like hope in the beginning of like, hey, we're going off on an adventure, but then all shall fade, and then it's just
And then I think they did this on purpose in some way to like make Denethor just so cringy about eating those like tomatoes and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Like I think there's like some subliminal messages behind the way he's like crunching and it's like desperation and stuff. But yeah, no, that scene with him singing and then Faramir, basically getting destroyed in battle and then being dragged by the horse as he's singing. I don't know. It's just so like symbolic, and yeah, I'm gonna have to watch that scene again on YouTube or something after this. It's so cool.
Dude, it's masterful cinema right there. But moving into our next question, though. So this is actually a very good question. Do you think that the action and battles from the movies live up to the action in the books? Because I think that honestly, like, Peter Jackson does a very good job of doing what he can in film compared to actual written word. But there's also a lot that you can miss. What do you think?
Yeah. So two things. So number one, I think that depending on your imagination, the book allows for a lot of creativity of what's happening. But I will give Peter Jackson a lot of credit for those who haven't read the books yet. So I'm a bit of a ways through the second book. And I have to say, I'm very impressed with how Peter Jackson added a lot of extra battles that you don't necessarily see in the books. And like, I know, if I remember right, we don't see very much of, what was the name of it where Boromir dies?
The Battle of Amen Hen?
Yeah, if I remember right, you don't actually see a lot of that battle in the book. Like, you see a little bit of it, and they're like, "Oh, orcs went through here," and then Boromir's dead, and they're like, "What happened?" But like, Peter Jackson like captures the actual battle, so I give him a lot of credit there.
No, you're actually spot on with that. Like, that was way more interesting than it was in the books for me, and that. Specifically the Battle of Amen Hen. The way that Peter Jackson was able to add in all of that action in order to make it something very, very, very important, but also very like intriguing, pulling the audience in. That was very, very good choice on his part. Yeah, to add into that action scene.
Yeah. I might have to make you ask me the question one more time. I lost my second train of thought.
Yeah, no, it's okay. But like, do you think that the action from the movies really lives up to the battles and fights from the book or books?
Yeah. Yep. So first thought was, I might make you edit this part out. Yeah. First thought was that it didn't miss everything. Man. Yeah, I had a really good second thought follow up, but I'll probably remember it after we're done. You go ahead. Do you feel like there was anything, with the books that was disconnected? Oh, wait. Okay, my second thought was that although Tom Bombadil did not, he was not in the movies because ultimately he didn't really play an important role in changing the story.
Mm-hmm.
You could have done it without him, maybe had Gandalf come save the day, but I really think it would have been really cool to see the scene, really eerie and creepy, probably the scene where Frodo and Sam get captured by those things called the Barrow Downs or whatever they are.
Oh, the Barrow Wights in the Barrow Downs.
Barrow Wights. I'm sorry, not Barrow Downs. The Downs are like the grounds. The Barrow Wights. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So picturing that scene, my mind kind of went to like Dementors from Harry Potter, these weird black, dark spiritual things. Mm-hmm. And they like sucked him into the ground and they were going to like sacrifice him. And then, Tom Bombadil comes in and sings this little weird happy tune and basically scares him off. But I think you still could have made that in the movies without Tom Bombadil. You could have, like I said, had Gandalf save the day or something. Mm-hmm. But I think that would have been an eerie, kind of a creepy, but a really, really good scene to have in. So,
yeah, I agree. Because Tom Bombadil in the books really just kind of pops in for a little bit. He does save him, but then he's gone he's gone. And he's a very mysterious character. He's a fun character for the books, but I understand why they didn't put him in the movie. But I do agree with you that the Barrow Downs scene would have been fun as all get out to watch. Because I mean, I imagine this like super creepy moment, like you're talking about, this like these spirits. Because actually, they were spirits that were actually summoned, almost like demons, by the who was it? I think it was the Witch King of Angmar, or was it?
Yeah, they're like the same. I think they're among. Don't quote me on this, but I think they're among like the same entity as those, as like the
Nazgul.
Yeah, the same entity as like the Nazgul. Like they're kind of along the same type of spirit or same type of person. They're that same weird, eerie ghost thing.
Right. They're similar. They're similar. The Nazgul are men. They started as men that by the power of the ring are unable to die. So then they passed over into the Wraith world. Whereas when you look at these Barrow Wights, they're actually like more like spirits that were summoned. So they might be dead people from before, but they were summoned back. They weren't people that like that transitioned from man into the Wraith world. So like they're just creepy as all get out. But that would have been a lot of fun to see in the movies. As far as back to the question of like, do I think that these battles actually add up against stack up against the ones from the books? I think most of the time, yes. However, specifically when you look at the Battle of Helm's Deep in the books, there's actually they get a little bit of it. They get a little bit of it in the extended edition of the Two Towers of the movie, where the forest comes, like the trees move. The Fangorn forest actually has the living trees that move, and then they move into the gulch of right in front of the gulch of Helm's Deep, and then they end up helping kill all of these orcs that are all these uruks that are flying out of there away from the battle. But there's actually like a really big plot point there. I say a lot plot point. It's kind of an interesting plot point. It was not huge, not game breaking. That would have been fun to see with having the Fangorn forest like moving in order to be able to kill all those orcs, because it really shows how invested they are. Because the forest itself, which was downplayed in the movies, is actually alive and hates most living things, not just uruks, not just orcs. But also any living thing, because a lot of men even would cut down trees and cut down forests, and so I thought that was kind of something that would have been interesting to see. But I think for the most part, the action from the movies are quite superb, and they really do a great job in depicting the scenes from the books. But we're moving on to our next question here, and here's actually a very good question. Do you think the Hobbit movies were able to capture the same like awe-inspiring, like incredible action that the Lord of the Rings movies had? Or do you think that there was something lacking there? What do you think, Aaron?
I'm going to play the bad guy, and I'm going to say no. I don't think so. Don't get me wrong. I liked the Hobbit movies, but me personally, I just had a hard time with the battle scenes. I just thought it was a bit too much CGI. I know I kind of already commented on that with like saying how I liked the incorporation of real people and how that made it feel more real. And then I actually liked how you mentioned that like the explosion that they had was like a real mini explosion and it wasn't CGI. So I just feel like Peter Jackson and the squad went a little too CGI heavy on the Hobbit, and it kind of lost some of that real feeling just with like the orcs being CGI, and then a lot of the battles were CGI. It took a step down from that real feeling. Now I understand that from a time perspective and a financial, actually maybe I don't know. It probably takes way more effort, takes way more time, possibly costs more too, to have to hire all these people, get the makeup for them, get the swords, but it just makes it so much more real.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm going to say no on that one.
And honestly, I agree with you. I mean, and the thing is, like, I actually really, really enjoy the Hobbits. I think more than the average Tolkien fan, because of the idea that most Tolkien purists hate the Hobbits, loathe them entirely. And I mean, there are even the sect of Tolkien purists that actually hate every Jackson film. They don't like the original Lord of the Rings trilogy either, which I think is like, how can you really? But they have their reasons. But going back to the Hobbits, though, I mean, most people hate them. I actually have some friends here where I live here in this town where they just won't even watch them. They're just like, I watched them before and I don't need to ever see them again. Hate them, loathe them entirely. And I'm like, I don't feel the same way. They're entertaining, but specifically, if you look at the Battle of Five Armies.
Oh no. Yeah.
Yeah, that one specifically, there's just like, there are moments that are like, this is super cool, but it just gets to be a lot. There are certain moments, like there's one moment, it didn't make much sense. And I think this is one of the reasons that people are like, why? It didn't make much sense, but it was a lot of fun to watch. The dwarves are all lined up with their shield wall, ready to repel the charging orcs that are coming down the hill. But then at the last minute, the elves jump over the shields, and then they come out and they start attacking. And it's like, that's cool. I can get behind that, but all of it was so CGI. Those were not real people. Those were CGI. And like CG is a wonderful, like I said, tool. But when you lean too much on it, you can tell when something is so CGI against a real person. If you would have had real people involved in that battle scene, it probably would have been a lot clunkier, but at the same time more realistic compared to like these super graceful and super like swoopy moves that they're doing. That is totally CGI and like totally on these animated rails that they need to do in order to be able to animate these characters. And but it was a cool thing. It was a cool scene, a cool thought, but it was just the CGI breaks it. And then also a funny thing is, if you watch the extended edition of the Battle of Five Armies, you get fatigued by just how much fighting there is. Because honestly, the only reason that they have an extra 20 minutes for the extended edition of Battle of Five Armies is because they add a bunch of unneeded battle. And so much of it is a bunch of real people interacting with CGI characters, but you can just tell that they were just stabbing in the midair, and then the animators had to like somehow get an orc in front of where they were stabbing, and it's just too much. And it's funny. The reason I bring that up as like an interesting fact is, when you watch the appendices for the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, for the extended editions, Peter Jackson actually talks about how they went out of their way to make sure that you do not get battle fatigue from the battle scenes in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And that's exactly what happens with the Battle of Five Armies. Now,
Peter, where'd you go wrong, man?
Exactly, yeah. Where did my boy go? But no, here's one praise I will give to the Hobbit trilogy is in the Desolation of Smaug. The whole interaction with Smaug, the dragon. A lot of people hate this scene because they think it just goes on forever and it's like meaningless, and they have their points, and they have actually good points. But for me, I actually really enjoy that whole scene where the dwarves are trying to figure out a way of fighting the dragon and stuff like that. They're trying to take the dragon out in that moment, but then they ultimately fail. Oh, it's just so cool because it shows how powerful Smaug is, that like the dwarves, there's a moment where you think that they won, but then he just explodes out of that pool of gold. And then he's just like, I'm going to attack the town because you guys are asking for it, I actually really enjoyed that. I think that that's actually a high point for the Hobbit trilogy. But ultimately, though, back to the original question, do I think that the Hobbits and their action scenes stack up against the Lord of the Rings? And I just don't think so. But here's our final question. And this is a very important question because it's kind of like a hot topic for a lot of Tolkien fans right now. We know of the Amazon series coming out, and we hope that it's going to be coming out somewhat soon. I heard 2022 is when they are expected to show us the first season, but with the pandemic and everything, who knows what's going to happen. But they say that it's going to have a lot of action. It's going to be, from what I can tell from like a lot of their leaks and stuff like that, and a lot of the official announcements that they've made, it seems like it's going to happen during the Second Age of Man, because the island of Numenor is actually confirmed to be in the series. But do you think that Amazon will be able to pull off the same level of action that we saw within the original Lord of the Rings trilogy? And now I'm not talking about the story overall, because the plot might be amazing, but if you have kind of subpar action, like people are going to be talking about that and comparing that to Peter Jackson's original Lord of the Rings trilogy all day long, if you cannot stack your action along with your story. So what do you think?
Yeah, so I'm going to put it, this scale doesn't even have anything to compare to, but I think it's going to be somewhere in between the original trilogy and The Hobbit. So I think I'm probably going to, how do I phrase that? So I'm probably going to like these battle scenes more than The Hobbit, but I would be hard pressed to like these battle scenes more than Lord of the Rings. From what I'm aware of, they have a lot of people from Game of Thrones who are working on this as well. Mm-hmm. And it seems that Game of Thrones has a good reputation for some pretty intense battle scenes. Now, that being said, I mentioned that and this is a total personal take, I liked the level, that fine balance of like battle violence, battle gore. I feel like Lord of the Rings had a good in between there, and it was realistic. Yeah, I mentioned that it's not like you didn't, like, somebody didn't cut and you didn't see like their guts falling out. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say that it will be, but I wouldn't be surprised if Amazon went more gory on the battles. I don't really have a huge basis for that, but it's Amazon. It's people from Game of Thrones. I wouldn't be surprised if battles were more gory, but I think that it will be a lot more people-centered and less CGI-centered. So I think, I'm going to go back to my music comment. I think if they use a lot of real people, and if they're able to incorporate some good music into the emotion of the battle, I think that I'll like these battle scenes more than The Hobbit. But like I said, I'd be hard pressed or blown away to try to like them more than the original Lord of the Rings battles. That's like an impossible barrier, but beating or enjoying battles better than The Hobbit, that's a doable barrier. I think that I'll like them better. So
yeah, that's actually a good little a good little rating system. Lord of the Rings versus The Hobbit for what for the benchmark that you want the Amazon series to strike. And I agree with you, namely because Amazon, if you look at some of their other original series, I'm thinking specifically about Jack Ryan. Have you seen Jack Ryan?
I have. Yeah.
It was decent. But the action was a lot of fun. But man, they do go gory in those in those seasons, 2 seasons of Jack Ryan, and I think that they're trying to meet that more mature audience with Jack Ryan, and then also hiring on, like you said, the Game of Thrones people. I think that they're going to be trying to hit a more adult, more mature audience, and I hope that I'm wrong. I really hope that I'm wrong because Lord of the Rings is really meant to be a young adult, now teen, because the term teen wasn't really popular back when Tolkien was writing the books, but it was meant to be a teen fantasy epic. Now a lot of adults love the books and the movies, of course, so it's not just exclusively that, but it was meant to be a young adult read back when it was originally written, and I think you kind of betray the spirit of things if you go too far into an adult adult thing, especially because the books never really talked about nudity. They didn't talk about dancing in the midnight type of stuff. Like they didn't really go into a lot of the adult sexual themes, but they did talk about some serious things when it came to like battle scenes and how people died. But I think Lord of the Rings, the original trilogy, really strikes that balance, like you said, very well. If they go too much on it, I've watched Jack Ryan, but me personally, I'm not a huge gore fan. Like over the top gore. Lord of the Rings is that's pretty safe for me. I think that's about as far as I want to go. I don't really want to go too much farther than that. Jack Ryan was a little bit too much, but I know that I'm a minority when with a lot of people my age saying that. But I also think that you are betraying the original feel of the story, not just the movies. Because you could talk all day in and day out about how your audience matures, and you need to be going along with that. Power Rangers, when they came out with that movie, that was a little more mature a couple of years ago. Like they were saying, our audience has matured. We need to go along with our audience. And sure, you can do that all day with that, but the Lord of the Rings is a little bit timeless. Yeah, a little bit more timeless than Power Rangers. Power Rangers was popular in the 90s, whatever. Yeah, sure, whatever. Now you had to try to bring it back in 2010s. But Lord of the Rings was created way back in the 1900s, way back in the 1930s and 40s. And then that was another publication in the 50s. And so that was when the story was being developed. And it's been loved for decades and decades. And now you're here in 2021, you've had 2 trilogies of movies come out in order to be able to tell this story. The story is beyond just the millennials from the 90s. You need to look at everybody as a whole. And Game of Thrones also, from what I've heard, the story really fell off the rails in the last season. I didn't watch Game of Thrones, so I don't know. But I'm hoping that people are like, listen, we need to stick to the stories that Tolkien wrote. And it sounds like they're going to be going from the Silmarillion. And I really hope that they do that and that they stay true to the original feel, especially with the action. Now, the action, of course, has already been translated from page to film when it comes to Jackson. And so I really think that they need to take the cues that Peter Jackson has done right with the Lord of the Rings trilogy and build off of that. And as best as they can, try to also fit their narrative, fit their story into the Peter Jackson world, because most people nowadays equate the Tolkien universe to the look that we see in the Peter Jackson films. And if you try to go different than that, I think when you look no further than the Star Wars universe. The Star Wars universe, the new sequel trilogy looks so much different than the originals and the sequels and the prequels. And of course, the prequels look a lot different than the originals, but they still had enough of the same spirit and feel that you could kind of feel that they're in the same universe. The sequels it seems like, yeah, you can see the Star Warsy stuff here, but it all seems like, like as wishes to Amazon. So the sequel trilogy is to the original trilogy. Like you can see the rebels, the rebel influence and the resistance, but like it's just different enough. And like the new sequel trilogy could just be its own generic sci-fi odyssey, space odyssey, whereas Star Wars has its very unique like feel about it, its unique look, and it's unique aesthetic. And I think Peter Jackson has also created that for the Lord of the Rings universe. You need to stick with that.
This is a completely random question before we close, but
yeah, go for it.
So I gotta brush up on my lore and my history a little bit. But so the Amazon show is taking place in Second Age.
Mm-hmm.
Was Sauron, was he raising to power in the Second Age, or was that Third Age?
Great question. So I'm going off my head, and I don't have. See, I haven't read the Silmarillion yet, so I can't just say this is definitively what it is because I can't remember. But if memory serves me correctly from the videos that I've watched on YouTube and other sources, I believe that Melkor dies, or not, doesn't die, but he gets sent to the void in the Second Age, and
so we might get Melkor possibly.
Yeah, so Sauron is actually in. I mean, he's actually like the right hand man to Sauron is the right hand man to Melkor, and so he'll have a presence. But I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, that Melkor being sent to the void actually ushers in the Third Age.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, I could be wrong. In fact, actually, now that I think about it, I think I'm actually wrong because I think the Battle of the Last Alliance is actually the thing that brings in the.
We'll brush up on that. That's all right.
Yeah, we're gonna have to leave that for another podcast. But
Yep.
But man, those are good questions. But with that being said, though, guys, thank you so much for joining us. That's all the time that we've got for today. Aaron, any last thoughts on action scenes from the Peter Jackson movies that you want to say?
I would just tell everybody, I would encourage you to rewatch the Battle of Helm's Deep with some headphones. So it's one thing if you watch it on your TV, but pull it up like on your phone, your computer, and put some good headphones in, and you just crank that music, and it's like a totally different battle scene. So yeah. It's beautiful. It's poetic. So
it really is. I mean, also the sound design is amazing with all the rain and everything bouncing off of the armor, that little clink, 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 clink. But yeah, so it begins. But then I really enjoy these movies. If I have to say one more thing before we end here, it's that these movies, they honestly have earned their place in cinema history, and I think that people need to leave them alone and not reboot them. All right, because I've heard rumors of that. So don't reboot these things. Let them live as the legends that they are. But with that being said, guys, thank you so much for joining with us and listening all the way here to the end. If you're still listening and you're on YouTube, go ahead and leave a comment on what you would like to see in future episodes of the Taking the Comments to Isengard podcast. But then also, please make sure to follow us on social media, Taking the Comments to Isengard on Instagram, and you can message us on there with any ideas that you have, as well as keep up to date on the things that we are doing. But guys, thank you so much for joining us. Aaron, thanks for doing this incredible podcast with me. It's been fun. And guys, know you're loved, and we'll see you you will hear us in the next one. See ya.